Welcome to the World Virtual Summit 2021. The International Movement for Leisure Activities in Science and Technology, MILSET, has organized this event for leaders from many countries that are interested in STEAM education. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Lisbela, MILSET Communication Manager, and I am very glad to receive you in this day. We have had some conferences, workshops, roundtables. We are very happy with the results. And today we have our next conference. Thank you to all the authorities who have supported this event. Thank you to UPAEP University. We are streaming live from Mexico, from the convention center in this university. And of course, if you want to watch us, you can get to MILSET Facebook and MILSET YouTube channel and our sponsors and partner channels. Thank you very much. So now I would like to present Ms. Bere Suarez, MILSET Managing Director. She will present the fantastic speaker we have today. Thank you. The mic is yours, Bere.
Thank you so much, Liz. Yes, we are so glad to have the following speaker that is giving us an amazing conferences. And well, without any other like previous message, I am introducing Mr. Alejandro Almazan Zimmerman. He studied a Master in Local Economy Development at the London School of Economics as a Chevening Scholar. His professional backgrounds includes a certificates on business intelligence from LATAM, mediation and conflict resolution from the CIDE, and a bachelor degree in financial management from the ITES, Mexico. Currently, he is head of Google for Education in Spanish-speaking LATAM. He was the chief executive officer of UNED, a non-profit focused on improving the quality and equity in the education sector in Mexico by using technology. Previous to these responsibilities, Alejandro worked at Pro Mexico as an executive advisor to the CEO and the diplomat at the government's business bureau based in London, attracting foreign direct investment and promoting trade. His experience in the private sector is mainly centered on finance. He worked as a financial associate at Mexico Retail Properties as a private equity focus on real retail estate and financial analyst in the corporate and investment bank division, Banamex Citigroup. So today, on behalf of MILSET, we are so glad and so honored to have Mr. Almazan to provide us with this amazing conference. Alejandro, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Alejandro. I'm happy to be here in this setting with so much enthusiasm, entrepreneurship, and student focus. And the aim of my conversation here is trying just to share a little bit of the process of innovation and how we at Google or Alphabet are trying to contribute a little bit into that agenda, and how at the end of the day, all of that innovation process ends up on the education and how things are evolving in education and how we from Google are trying to address different needs. But it's going to be a journey of innovation from our side, and I hope that it's a fruitful conversation, and that at the end of the day we can add a little bit of value into the process. And first, I would like to just share with you an anecdote with my daughter that didn't end exactly as I expected, but it has a point with regards to what I tried to share with you. Can you go to the next slide, please? So basically, at one point, I was just asking her, what do you think is the most dangerous animal in the planet? I asked my 4-year-old. So, I mean, her first reaction was the lion. And why do you think it's the lion? Well, because of his mouth and his teeth and his claws. And what if I said that it wasn't a lion? No? What other animal would you think? Well, the snake, because of the you know. And we started to go through different animals that she perceives as very dangerous. So then we started to make a short research just to see, which was the most dangerous animal. And it was a big surprise for her, and it didn't end exactly as I was expecting it. If you can go to the next, slide. And basically, the most dangerous animal in the world, it's the mosquito. So the problem with this is that she got, of course, now she's very frightened about the mosquitoes, and I wasn't expecting that to happen. She sees a mosquito, and now she's like, ah! But really, what's behind why the mosquitoes are the most dangerous animal in the world, and then humans, is not because they are strong, it's not because they have big teeth, or it's because they have big wings, or because they are big. It's really because they were able to adapt, and in the evolution cycle, they managed basically to survive and to change. And regardless of the mosquito or regardless of the human beings, really the message here is, if you want to survive, you need to adapt. And what is happening in the education sector, especially given COVID, gives us a big reflection on how the education sector needs to adapt, and how there are schools that are adapting, and what could happen to different institutions that are not being able to adapt at that pace, or that are unwilling to adapt. And this reflection is something that, at the end of the day, from our side, we are always trying just to push further and to provide solutions that can help us move the needle into that direction. Now, when we speak about education, and if you can go to the next slide, education, pertains different things. And if we look how Eric Schmidt, who was the chairman of Google, and he was the CEO of Google for several years, and was an important pillar to address our growth. Basically, what he said is that you need to, in order for you to have the culture of innovation, you need to get it right. And basically, the story of innovation hasn't changed. And it has always been a small team of people who have an idea. And this idea is typically not fully understood by people around them, or even understood by their executives. So it's always this idea, small team, great execution, that really brings things together. In the context of MILSET, this is great because many of you are probably there, are probably in a very inspiring moment of your lives, meeting new people, and that interaction could eventually lead to something really special. But schools need to also have the possibility to engage into this type of endeavors and get a small team of people just trying to move the needle and trying to understand how to move forward. Now, when you want to move things forward, the way in which we are trained, or the way in which we think about improving and innovation, sometimes is linked to incremental improvements. If you can go to the next. And within Google depends on a company called Alphabet. I'll speak a little bit about Alphabet. But in Alphabet, there is one company that's called Google X. So Astro Teller over here, he leads the engineering side of Google X, where they incubate many of the big moonshot initiatives that Google has. And he shares this very interesting reflection, which is sometimes it is easier to improve 10 times, 10x, than what it is to improve by 10%. And this opens up a great set of possibilities on how to address one single problem, and opens also, or makes us closer to being those actors that can try to change things, thinking completely out of the box. And in this process of innovation and trying to solve for 10x, what Google finally did was to change its the way in which it is organized, and perhaps you can go to the next slide, where it has a holding company called Alphabet, and Google depends on Alphabet. When you speak about Google, if you can go to the next slide, most of the times you will probably think about search. But Google is, or Alphabet in this case, it's very, very wide. And over there in the top, you have Google X, where they incubate different initiatives from Google and then spin them off into specific companies that depend on Alphabet, but they are trying to solve things very creatively. So I'm going to share some of the things that we are trying to solve, and trying to address this principle of 10x, and how things have been evolved, and how Google has been able to bet on different ideas, and eventually it has had the capacity to pivot into something else. For instance, if you can go to the next slide. One of the main challenges that people with diabetes have is to have a good understanding about their glucose level. So depending on the type of diabetes that you have, you will eventually probably need to get a reading from your blood and understand those levels. So one of the ideas, of the challenges that we faced was, how can we provide a simple way in order to have a very accurate measurement all the time on the glucose levels? And the idea, instead of pinching your finger to get a drop of blood, or there are other instruments that are a little bit cumbersome to use, because you basically need to have a needle beneath your skin, 24/7. They came up with this idea about having a contact lens that could have the sensors in order to read the glucose level, and to have the transmission in order to send that into an app, so that only by putting that contact lens you would be able to have a continuous measurement of your blood levels and your glucose levels in your blood, and have a different type of experience on the monitoring side and also on the comfortable side. And they released this idea, and it was a very good idea. And they spin off a company called Verily, which deals with these types of innovations. Time passed by, and for different reasons, what they did is they pivoted this into a different way to monitor the glucose level, which, if you can help me with the next slide, it's basically, this like coin size monitoring artifact that you basically put on your skin, and then instead of having that contact lens, you can have it on your skin and have even more accurate levels of measurements in your glucose levels. No, this is one of the different things that Verily is actually doing, but you can see how by innovation, by trying and failure, by piloting, Google managed to address an important problem. In my country, in Mexico, diabetes is a big health problem, and these types of solutions contribute into handling this health public policy conundrums, let's say. Now, a different way in which we are trying to come up with innovative solutions to a given set of circumstances is with autonomous cars. Perhaps you can go to the next slide. So there is this company that you might have heard of called Waymo, and Waymo started, like their process in 2009, dealing with trying to figure out how exactly to get autonomous cars on the field. And it has been a very interesting experience, and a lot of learning has happened since 2009. But it was in 2015 when this small car became the first fully autonomous car driving a street. And from then onwards, there are different solutions on the commuting industry where Waymo has been contributing a lot. And now you find hundreds of these cars and different Waymo cars driving across the United States with a very analytical, intense, but innovative way to approach this understanding around the car. If you can go to the next one. So basically, Google came up with this solution called LiDAR. And LiDAR is the brain that basically allows the car to move around. And it does that by ways of sending out millions of beams every second, 360 degrees. And they have different technologies in order to do this. The first is by sending laser beams, 360, they can have an idea about the picture of what it is around, because these laser beams basically tell them, like the different figures that are moving around, and like what are the different objects that are out there. Then they have a radar, and with the radar they can detect how far away things are. No, so they have an understanding of what they see, and they have an understanding of how far away things are. And then they have high resolution cameras in order to detect things such as the light stops. So they can understand and decipher what are the things that are around. And with this technology, they can have a vision of 3 football fields ahead and behind, just to make a construction of the whole world that it's surrounding. And they start, the solution starts making predictions on how things are going to move, if a car is expected to go to the left or to the right, if you have someone on a bike moving, if they are shaking their hands, what does that mean? Will that person stop or not? And the combination of all of these technologies make the car move safely around the streets. Every time the car moves around, they make a picture of what is happening around, so they learn how the streets are, and eventually it makes it very easy for the car to move and to transport people around. it has been a long journey of a lot of learnings, but at the end of the day, by having this combination of innovation and perseverance, we now have something that it's eventually it can transform a whole industry and make things easier around us. In order for Google to get into that stage, it had to build a lot on other skills. For instance, if you go to the next slide, we have incremental capacity to analyze information, and using artificial intelligence and machine learning, we're able to understand and predict many of the things that happen around business and around the important things that matter. The artificial intelligence is not an end in itself. It's basically a tool, but it's a very important tool that is shaping the way in which Google is contributing to the world in order to try to address some of the problems that are out there. If you go to the next slide, another really interesting project that Google has done, or Alphabet, is called the Project Makani. And basically, the problem here is how could we make wind energy even more efficient? If you can go to the next slide. So basically, when you have these windmills, the larger the windmills are and the rotor diameter, the more energy you can generate. So the challenge was, how can we increase the size of the diameter, but without having such a big windmill? Because as the windmills get larger, it gets more difficult to transport them, especially when you have places with a lot of wind. When you have those places, you're probably in a very remote area. Sometimes it is desert-like, but at least in Mexico, it's very mountainous-like. So how could we solve for that? And the engineering team came up with this idea about having a kind of a kite that with a cable that transmits the electricity output can fly in circles, can be autonomous, and you wouldn't require such a big windmill, nor a post, and you could be able to get it back into its original position when required, and when the conditions are there, it could fly by itself and just generate larger capacity of electrical energy. So this was a different way. Of course, there was a lot of transition how to get there, but at the end of the day, it's a different way, an innovative way to address the way in which the market was solving for wind energy. And all of these examples give you an idea about, how to address different problems and how things evolve. Like, for instance, if you go to the next slide, you might have heard about Project Loon, which were these very high altitude balloons that could have internet capacity and just send out internet signals to huge geographical areas. Those balloons stayed between 100 and 200 days high in the atmosphere, and they were basically a set of balloons that the more you move up into the sky, you will find different air currents. So sometimes if you are at a certain level, you would have an air current going this way, but if you go a little bit up, then you might find it going to a different direction. So imagine a network of these balloons that are moving in vast areas / around the world. And whenever it is required, they would send out an internet signal. And these were particularly important in Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, when the whole country had a big problem with regards to connectivity and electricity and communications and so forth. And this project was very, very helpful in those circumstances. And then as the engineering team started just to think more about how to do and how to still solve for connectivity, they came up with this other idea, if you can go to the next slide, which is, what if instead of having fiber optic in a cable, what if instead we had a laser beam that could send out the same amount of information as a fiber optic, but through the air? So imagine having this Tara device emitting the signal, and then 10 kilometers away or 15 kilometers away, in a very remote area, you would have the receptor. And you would therefore send the internet to that faraway village that if you wanted to take 15 kilometers of fiber optic through, like those difficult terrains, it would be very costly and not that efficient. And now they are deploying this type of solutions in many places in Africa, in some places in Mexico, and in other different countries. So there are, as you've seen, multiple examples of ways in which Google and Alphabet have tried to embrace innovation and try to solve for different things. But what does all of these things have to do with education? If you can go to the next slide. And there is an interesting reflection in that regards, because, next slide. If we look at how education is configured right now, let me, for the sake of argument, speak about pre-COVID interactions. This is a classroom in a school in the US that it's probably like very close to what you've experienced before. No, you have a teacher that is sharing information, and you have children, youngsters, teenagers, just paying attention and writing notes and discussing. But if I look how things were, let's say, 1,000 years ago, if you can go to the next slide, and we grab this image from a university in India 1,000 years ago, it's very alike. At the end of the day, like, it seems as if things have not changed completely throughout the time, no? So it's contradicting to have, on the one hand, this highly innovative contributions, and in the education sector, we could have this feeling that perhaps things are not moving at the same pace as many other things addressed by technology, no? And there are good examples of things that are happening, and the important thing is just or what really motivates us is to understand that I am sure that there are going to be plenty of new contributions in the future. If you go to the next slide, education doesn't need to be only technology driven at all. And I'm not saying by far that this should be the way in which education needs to be performed. But this is a school also in the US, in Texas. And if you see the screen, there are interesting things that are happening, no? that in this image, there are some paradigms being broken. So the first is, you can see that there is a lot of interaction, and you can see that children are active, and that activeness has a direct impact on retention, on memory, and it's very useful for pedagogical reasons. In some places, there are children speaking to each other, but that action, in this particular case, it's also with laptops, with Chromebooks. The second thing, which is very important to see, is if you see the screens of the children, you can see that all of the screens are basically different. And one of the important features of technology is basically providing the way to personalize your experience and to provide a wide variety of content that you can choose from. And that's very important, because if we go back to the previous slide, where you had the more typical classroom there, like the interaction is more into listening into one person, and everything is anchored to the teacher. But over here, really, it's more into what the individual is looking after. If you go to the next slide. And the third interesting thing about this picture is that it's the rhythm. And what in the learning process, the best rhythm is basically our own rhythm. So in a normal class, what happens is, when you're a teacher, you might find people that know about the topic, or that are very eager about to go at a faster pace. And you might find other students that are not that interested or not that knowledgeable about the topic. So you tend up to go at more or less at the pace of the middle, no? And with technology, what you can do is basically go more or less at your own pace. And that is a very important principle in education, because it can actually customize the experience. So given this context, what are we doing from Google into the education? How are we contributing to education? So in Google, there was this principle that we wanted to address, which was, how can we bring the best of Google into education? And we came up with different solutions. If you can go to the next one. But the condition, in order to bring these conditions further, was that we needed to have the teacher and the student at the center of the experience. And with technology, we could complement the experience, the teaching and the learning experience. So specifically, what are we contributing to the education world? If you go to the next one. So the first is hardware. You might have probably known, addressed, used an Android phone or an Android tablet, no? So we have the equivalent of that operating system, but used for a laptop. And that operating system was highly thought on education. So we basically came up with a Google laptop called the Chromebook. And the Chromebooks have many nice advantages, and perhaps some of you have used them in the past. But right now, they are the most used device in the world for education purposes. And we're really happy to contribute in that respect. The second has to do with the software environment, the productivity tools, the collaboration tools that have our solutions called the Workspace for Education. And it's basically, you can use your Gmail in an education domain. So it's not called Gmail, but it's, the same principle, email. And we have a calendar, and we have docs and sheets and slides and many other different apps and programs that eventually are used to have a very good teaching and learning education experience, and to follow up on homeworks and assignments and things like that. And one of the main pillars of our education proposal is on Google Classroom. Perhaps some of you have used Google Classroom. It's basically a way to facilitate how teachers use or plan their lessons, and how they interact with students, and how they can have control on what is happening. And right now, in this context of COVID, this has been very, very helpful. And finally, it has to do with training and providing content and becoming a platform for others to create content, so that the education experience can be more fruitful, more friendly, more time-lasting, and that it could eventually have great results on the motivation of the students. No? If you go to the next slide. So in sum, this innovation process that I was speaking about came up for the education side on very concrete solutions that build on many of the things that we shared before. These solutions have a lot of artificial intelligence embedded on them. But at the end of the day, they are not the final stage of what will happen in education. Innovation will continue to happen. And that process is not only responsibility of us, it's responsibility of everyone. And as you as students come closer to contributing into shaping all of this, I think that the education sectors will be more prepared to adapt and fulfill the way in which students right now are looking at education. Remember that first slide on the mosquitoes? We need the teachers and the students and the school systems understand that the time has changed, and now students have different motivations and different tools, and they need to be accompanied in a different way in their learning process. And I am sure that we will be close to that process, and from Google we're very excited to contribute at scale on these endeavors. Thank you very much for your patience and your interest, and happy to receive some questions.
Hello.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for such an amazing conference. Of course, we are aware, we're sure that Google has shaped up all what we think about education, and has helped us these days to have a better experience in these pandemics regarding education, how and the way we contact our teachers, our students, and everybody. So thank you very much for the information. Of course, everybody, I'm sure they are excited about what you have said. And I have some questions from the audience. The first question is, what is the main challenge that Google Education has faced during this pandemic?
So I think that one of the main challenges that we faced is not a technical challenge, because at the end of the day, technology is designed to scale. It's more the cultural change on how teachers feel about using technology, because from one day to another, they were more or less forced to try to engage with technology. So if you don't have the proper infrastructure, if you're not savvy enough to use technology, if you had not done it before, or if your students don't have that access, or if there's the students' parents don't have that knowledge, implementing the cultural change is very difficult. Now, that is not something that we as Google can have a direct influence on, other than making it easier for users to take advantage of our tools. But it has to do more into the education systems. And when we spoke with the ministers of education and with school principals, all of the different things that they had to address from a people perspective on, health and dropout rates and access to infrastructure. And when you needed to put into that equation the use of technology, things took a little bit more time in some circumstances than others. Of course, there were schools and universities that were fully prepared, and for them it was a very easy step, and they appreciated their resilience because they had made the proper investments in the past. But for many others, especially when we speak about the public schools, there is a lot of things to happen on a more cultural way, and I think that that's one of the biggest challenges that we have in order to make all of these teachers and this student community realize the benefits of complementing the teaching and learning experience with these types of solutions.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is, which is the star tool of Google, the most used, the one that is like the top tool for Google?
Well, Google has more than 9 different apps or solutions that have more than 1 billion users every day. So, like the Google search, no? Or Waze, or Google Cloud. And all of these somehow have shaped or helped shape the access to information. Our mission is to organize the world's information and make it accessible to everyone. Now, on education, it's easier to depict because like we are in constant contact with the student and teacher community, and basically the main app is called Google Classroom, which I was explaining briefly before. And that, if we look at all of the number of students that are using it, more or less 15% of all of the students in the world are using Google Classroom. So it's great to have such a big contribution to how teachers teach. And from Google for Education side, that's our anchor app.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alejandro. And the next question is there any program in which Google for Education works directly with students?
Yes. We work directly in students, not in personal engagement, but it is more into content that we put out there on a scalable way so that students can engage with us. Perhaps you can help me going back 2 slides. If there is someone there. One next. There. On the right-hand side, for instance, we have the CS First, which is Computer Science First. And this is an initiative on how to share, teach, help students learn coding. So it's free and it's scalable, and it's made from Google, and it has partnership with other organizations that do similar things. And we have the Chromebook App Hub, which is a site that has a lot of educational content, free educational content, some provided by us, but a lot provided by others, where you can just tap and figure out and explore the ways in which you would like to things that you would like to learn. And from a teacher perspective, I know that the question was more on a student perspective, but on the teacher side, we have a teacher center that basically provides free training courses in order for teachers to use technology in their teaching process. And at some point, if they want, they can get into a certification path. If they want, they can do a test and then get a certification recognized by Google. So there is plenty of information out there, but the logic that we have is more to serve as a platform. Instead of us providing information, what we want is for a lot of innovation to happen around us, and that they can easily use our solutions in order to communicate or exploit or complement their experience and access to their solutions.
The next question is, in your opinion, how will be the close future of education?
The close, right, in the proximity.
Yeah, regarding virtuality due to social inequity, it says.
Yeah, it's that's going to be very challenging because there are many different realities out there, and years ago, decades ago, a very important development measurement had to do with literacy levels. So basically, if you knew how to read and write, you had a huge level of advantage from someone that doesn't. And what is happening is that with technology, something similar could also be happening. No, if you are technologically savvy, technologically proficient, you will have a lot of information and analysis capabilities at your hand versus someone that doesn't have that access. So that it could happen in the future, and it's happening now, that the access to education via technology or access to technology versus lack of access could eventually spread the gap. Now, on the other way is someone that has access to technology can have access to the world's best knowledge. So in a very remote village with a device and connectivity, you can get free lessons from Ivy League universities, which without technology, that person would be very far away from that reality. And you would have access to many different solutions and information out there. So in that regard, access to technology is a very strong democratization tool. So it levels the playing field. The problem is the lack of that access spreads up the gap. Therefore, it is important to promote a good infrastructure. And in our case, let me give you an example of one thing that we did in Mexico, is we gave free access to our solutions, the workspace that I was referring, for free to all of the public students in K-12 in Mexico and the teachers. Everyone has access for free, and we opened accounts for everyone. In reality, there are some places where they fully take advantage of them, and there are other places where they don't have the infrastructure. So from our respect is to make it inclusive, the access to information, it's a good playing field, but in our very diverse reality, there are many things and many challenges that don't allow us to exploit fully the potential of access to technology, connectivity, and information.
Alejandro. The last question is about from all the developments or the future developments that Google is planning, which fascinates you the most?
That's a hard question. There is one project which is one of these moonshot projects from one company that's spin off from Google X called Calico. And basically what Calico is trying to do is to find ways to make people live longer. And apparently in the research that has happened is that we naturally grow up and our cells get older and they lose some properties. And apparently there is an explanation that addresses the way in which species evolve. And nature found a proper balance for this evolution in order to have very concrete life cycles of all species, so that you can have a better evolution, and it is species could adapt, and you could have like food cycles and things like that. But in reality, it doesn't really need to be that way, other than this principle of evolution. So this company called Calico is finding specific ways, of course, right now at a very experimental level, just at a molecular level, of changes that could happen in order to make us live longer. And that would be really interesting, because eventually knowing that could have other types of benefits and other types of implementations or cures that for the time being we are not fully aware or capable of addressing. I don't know if it's going to, I'm going to see it on my lifetime, but nevertheless, just getting into this biological science fiction mindset is really interesting, really motivating.
Sounds like sci-fi, definitely. Well, Alejandro, thank you very much, and thank you to all the audience. I would like to now tell a little bit of the greetings. There are many greetings from several parts of the world. From Paraguay, we have greetings. We have greetings from Turkey, Chile. We have greetings from Mexico, of course. And people that it's watching us from Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, Costa Rica, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Cuba, the USA, Canada, Venezuela, Ecuador, Spain, Portugal, Morocco, South Africa, Namibia, the United Kingdom, Germany, Belgium, Russia, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates. Well, everybody's watching you, so thank you very much for this great conference. And for the people who is in the Teams meeting in this special conference, please keep in the meeting. With Alejandro, you will have time to ask your questions privately. Thank you very much to everybody, and see you tomorrow. Today is our last conference of the day. For the people who have registered to the MILSET World Virtual Summit, remember that we have still the last workshop of the day in some minutes. So we see you in the meeting in some minutes. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you, on the contrary.